You. Hello, YouTubers.
Ooh, how'd you
Good
get here?
timers.
Hi.
Oh my God. What are you doing in my house?
Oh.
Hey, you're watching To Boldly Watch ASMR version.
Oh no, are we going to have to do this all the time?
I'm in.
If you could pop some bubble wrap for me while I apply my lip gloss.
With my mouth?
I'm glad this is on
Wait.
YouTube.
You're going to, yeah.
I mean, I could also
No, keep going,
put
actually.
bubble
That's
wrap
nice.
in my mouth and pop it too.
Stop making this sexual, Jake.
It's
Go
not
on.
sexual. It's bubblish.
Oh, delicious. Sponsored by Gum.
You want to record some audio?
Yeah.
Bubblicious. Wow. That was just a block of sugar that you chew and spit out.
You seem like the type of person that, like the bubble tape, you would just open up and
How
take a
did
big
you
old...
know?
I know you.
I didn't like the baseball one, though.
No.
Big League Chew.
Gross.
Mhm.
It was just like rock. Like a pink rock eraser that you put in your mouth.
No, wasn't it like
No, it was like
strips of
shredded.
gum? Yeah, shredded. Like, it
Oh,
was like
that.
shredded
Yeah,
chicken
do you like
gum.
shredded mozzarella gun? Yeah,
Because it was supposed to replace chewing tobacco, wasn't it?
Well,
basically.
I mean, it's supposed to have
for
kids
children.
emulate
To get-
chicken.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
to
to
get
get them
addicted.
addicted to it early.
Speaking of addiction,
Let's
Record
this
audio.
episode.
let's talk
Good segue.
about how addicted we are to Lieutenant
to
Yar.
Star Trek. Oh, yeah.
No, yours next episode.
I
Well,
know
she
it
has some
rhymes.
good-
It's gonna be really hard for me to not mention it.
It's, this is...
Oh yeah, hold on. I just remembered how angry I am about this episode. Okay.
Right. Yar has
Hold on,
the
let me
say
get
no
my
to
angry
drugs, moment.
That's true. We gotta talk about that. All right, let's.
I'm
can
really
we sync
shiny,
audio
but I
first?
kind of like it. Okay, hold on. Recording.
Recording.
Recording. Oops, nope, not recording.
Liar.
Recording. All right. 1, 2, 3.
And the one, and the two.
Don't snap.
The one, two, three.
I can take that. And I'm looking at the notes for Symbiosis. Okay, cool. Lightning fights,
Lightning fights.
right? Do we have an intro for this one? I don't think we
Wait,
did
I got
this.
one.
You got one? Go for it.
Yo, bro, you want to like save me? Okay. I guess I was like condemned to doom, but if you want help.
Becca, you're not transmitting anything. Do you not know how to do this? Do you not
Could
know
you
how?
like come over here and push the button for me to transmit to you?
Sorry. Can we get someone to help her? Can we get anybody? Like, how did you get this far in life, much less recording anything?
Do you see the single button that you have to press to activate the remote? You do see it, right?
Oh, this one?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
a watch. Okay.
Nope, that's right. Now
It's
just
a button.
align the magnetic coil and then push the button.
Yeah, use pressure on your finger to
None of
hit
us
to
know
press
how
the
to
button.
do that.
Are your parents home?
Who? I don't know if I ever had any.
Whoa, backstory unlocked.
What's crazy about that is we made that last for like maybe a minute and a half, but they made the whole first act about their
It
ignorance.
was so long, and they were so snarky about it. Like, they weren't willing to help them at all. They're like, what, you've never heard of a magnetic coil before?
They don't
No,
even
they
know
were
the
being
verb.
helpful. What, you mean the crew of the Enterprise? I thought they were super accommodating, that these people did not know the parts of their own freaking ship.
We could have done with less attitude, is all I'm saying.
I could have done with more attitude. I do not appreciate incompetence in any form.
Whoa.
I agree with Becca about the crew like being helpful. That's true. They were like doing their best, but they were very aghast at how ignorant these people were. Which, I mean, did we even really get into why that happened? Because they spent 20% of the episode going over that, but like it's just because they are a pre-warp species and they are the lesser, like they are the group that is marginalized because of the economic problem, right?
Yes,
Well,
and
before we do all that,
Oh, yeah.
let's tell them what episode this was and what it was about for those who are just catching up.
Great. Very natural way to get into that. It is
I'm
symbiosis.
great at segues.
It's Symbiosis. After the Enterprise-D rescues a freighter crew and the ship's important cargo, Captain Picard faces a difficult dilemma. Uphold the Prime Directive or save an entire civilization from exploitation.
Spoilers. He exploits he lets this continue. It's nonsense. I'm so upset. This whole episode, I was like, Picard, I get that you have a philosophy and I'm done with it. The Prime Directive is trash.
Oh, yeah? Okay. All right. We'll get into that.
Yeah, we will.
Fucking fix the problem. Fucking just fix the problem. It's right there. Crusher gets it. Crusher gets it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to have to make this a higher level, censor rating on this episode because I can't fucking stand the Prime Directive right now.
Well, let's find out how
mad at the Breckians.
The Becca ain't no Brecca,
Well, let's see how we get there, right? So the Enterprise is exploring some solar flares that are happening on us nearby stars. Is that right?
Yeah, and they activate their computer eclipse module.
I know, it is a black dot.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to lower the lighting effect or something, but they're like, nope, just
Listen, they were figuring out the visuals. It's fine.
Ooh, yeah. The graphics of the solar flare are not that crazy. Crazy bad, but
Yeah.
But solar flares in general are absolutely terrifying. We have narrowly missed several. There was the last one in the 80s that just barely missed Earth. I watched a video from Kyrgyzstan, which is my favorite YouTube channel.
Yeah, Kyrgyzstan.
Yeah, it's like animated infographics. We'll put the link in the show notes to this episode about solar flares. It's just like a 3-minute infographic thing.
Also,
we are not
just as
ready.
A quick warning for anybody that's going to go watch In a Nutshell by Kyrgyzstan. It's going to instill some new anxieties that you didn't know that you had before and awaken and enhance some ones that you already did. Just a quick warning.
Sweet, cute birds are going to explain it to you in a man with a very soothing voice.
Beautiful. It's beautifully animated.
I feel most things about astrophysics that are about the grand scale of what's going on are always a little anxiety-inducing.
Yep.
You realize how small we really are.
Honestly, this is a real tangent, but things like that reduce my anxiety because my anxiety is about my own personal bullshit. And as soon as I think, I'm meaningless, I'm a speck of dust in the universe, everything's a little, lighter on the shoulders.
That's so true. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of it all, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great perspective into these characters that we're talking about as well, because you have these two factions coming from different planets coming in, and they're so focused on this one issue or this one sort of thing. It is all consuming for one of these species because they feel like they will die without a specific medication that is processed on the other planet.
And they don't even just think, they believe that because they've been told that too.
Yeah. And they feel the symptoms. They feel as if they're going through something that's going to kill them.
Withdrawal is no joke.
Yeah, serious. And so, but again, that's just that perspective of coming in from the Federation or the Enterprise's perspective. And as you mentioned, Becca, the Prime Directive is one of the first things that's brought up. Picard is saying, we can't directly interfere with the politics of this, delicate ecosystem.
I have so many, but why not this comments about this episode. But yeah, it's really interesting. These two planets. So one is a complete parasite on the other. They didn't develop any other industry except making this pill for the other people on the other planet to take. But I guess we can go, act by act and get to the reveal, which was not a reveal because I knew it the whole time. Let me tell you.
Oh, really? Was that your theory going forward from?
Yeah, I wrote they're being drugged. This is for sure. Because the body language was total tweaker. Mm-hmm. I was making jokes about it, but the Breckians from Brecca are the ones that are really polished, put together, have pastel jumpsuits, like they're in some sort of gym top group.
Yeah.
And
and the holograms?
Yeah, Jim and the holograms. And then the Onarians from Onara, they were the ones that originally developed a lot more industry on their planet and then got this terrible plague, and only this one plant on Brecca could save them. So yeah, it's called Felicium is the drug. Felicity, happiness. Oh, we've heard all this before.
Wow. That's a great perspective.
Anyway.
I just thought the scientist that named it was Felicia, and she was like, it's named after me.
It's mine. Yeah, and I think we do discover later that there actually was a plague that was affecting this other other planet, and that they eventually, it did get cured, but they were addicted to this
The
crop.
cure. Yeah,
Cure.
that's a really, actually, that's a pretty solid way of making it feel more believable, is that there truly was an issue, but through the exploitation of how the medicine was delivered, they just kept up drugging these people. And it
That's
became
how all conspiracy theorists get their fuel. One nugget of truth, and they just take away.
We'll
So-
see a few direct parallels for this too, but this is especially a sign of the times of like the DARE program and these public services against drug use, or what perceived drug use was.
Right,
And
war
so
on drugs.
Exactly. And so this was just the Star Trek writers kind of playing into that and seeing, like, from their perspective, someone who goes into a hospital and gets addicted to morphine or an opiate addiction or something like that, where it may have helped at one point but becomes something else. It's their sort of analogy for
It's
the
interesting
audience.
you put it in those terms, because thinking about the time, it was very much like drug users or criminals was the zeitgeist of the time. But that's not the perspective this takes. It sees the people who become addicted as the victims of the drug, which of course is how we see it now.
Right. Yeah, it feels like, well, we'll talk about it actually in terms of the speech, because there was a lot of fighting amongst the crew and cast about this one. So let's actually get how we got there. So there was a solar flare investigation. We find this freighter that has these two species aboard. They beam first their cargo over, which we learn later is the medicine, and then they come aboard.
Which was perilous because the ship was going down. It was about to be incinerated, and they only had a limited amount of time.
And they had like
we reenacted all of this in the beginning of the podcast.
I wanted to talk about
clear.
that. I wanted to talk about that scene though, because it felt like an improv group that had one person who just joined for the first day. Like they were like, okay, we're gonna do a Star Trek scene, and then they're like, give him orders. He's like, I don't know what that is. He's like, it doesn't matter if you don't know what it is, just go do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, which character?
The whole
John
or whatever, the guy on the other side of the ship who just didn't know what was happening. He couldn't even respond with like let me try it. It was just more like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that they were trying to play up this like class difference of, there are people that are working on the ship, this freighter, and there are people that are like that own the ship,
Yeah.
But it does fall apart because the people that are running the ship would know how to do basic things because they were running the ship.
I just love that he calls out. He's like, "Hey, can you do a warp coil?"
No one?
No one here can do it.
No one can do it. So there are different theories that maybe they took over the ship. And there were stowaways that were...
See, I was wondering if we were seeing a repeat of that Klingon episode we just did where they took over the Ferengi ship,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
The
So
freighter.
There's precedent for that, but I think they just needed it they just made the scrambling as a plot device.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to say that I wrote down that they should abandon this freighter because the Prime Directive says this dude wants to die.
The Prime Directive is so weird. Like it's very fluid in terms of how they address things. So this is a pre-warp
How can you go talk
civilization?
to anybody if
Right.
if you're talking to them might interfere?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very true. That's a very valid point. The Prime Directive gets really wishy-washy in terms of the writers' room of Star Trek, I think, in all the series, because they have to they still have to pay service to like being space explorers and finding new civilizations, which is literally in the codified in the part of Star Trek is finding new civilizations, but it's not like they're omitting civilizations that are pre-warp. They just their interference is kind of fluid, I guess.
Exactly. That's why it should be more like what a therapist has to say. Like you have patient confidentiality until someone's in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're going to exploit an entire planet, I'm going to call that danger.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think with this one, in essence, the Prime Directive is the Deus Ex Machina of Star Trek in a way. It's the scapegoat for doing good things. It's the scapegoat for doing bad things. It's the excuse that you can use to help someone or the excuse that you can use to not help someone for the greater good. And we've heard time and again that there was resistance in the writer's room for this utopia because there's no conflict. And I can see someone going, well, there's the Prime Directive. Use that and fight morally. Because, we kind of get these two versions of Trek in like the adventure on the planet Trek or the moral quandary. And the best Trek combines the two. but this seems to be more of the moral quandary side.
I think you're right. I think they use it as the conflict point because so many of their other interpersonal problems have quote unquote been solved, by what Roddenberry wanted for the beginning of the series. So it makes a really interesting point that they have to kind of debate, and they definitely do debate it. And Crusher makes, I think, a really good point, Becca. I was like totally on board with Crusher for much of this episode. I get it.
Yeah. But maybe we should continue walking through steps of it before I rant and rave some more.
We're in the cargo bay. We find out that one of these species is selling let's get their species right. So it is the Onarans.
I thought it was an N. Yeah, the Breckons.
And the Breckians. Okay.
Which
so
sounds a lot like Beckians, which is what I'm going to call my planet. So this is kind of upsetting.
The Beckians are selling their this medicine to the Onarans. And we've realized that, there's something a little wonky with this relationship in terms of like they're not really willing to give it up without payment, which they've now lost.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, your entire society is based off the industry of distilling this one plant to exploit this other planet where you get everything from? So this is where it gets a little crazy, because why aren't there artisans on their planet that are like, you know what, I'm going to weave textiles just because I love to do it. I love to make pastel clothing that's shiny and would look great on stage.
Because, and I can tell you, like, for me, if I took this thought experiment of what civilizations would look like, the Breckons would have to be either an entire society keeping a secret, or just like the top order would keep this secret because they were aware of what's going on. They know what's happening. But in order for it to function for that long, they would have to keep their own citizens in the dark, I'm sure. And
because they knew the two Breckons on the ship. And so I was like, okay, hold on. How come there was never a little love situation where we've got a Romeo and Juliet and they tell each other and it spoils the whole planet's secret?
God, that would be cool. That's actually a great idea. I would love a B plot that's something like that. This is another episode.
I'll submit to Gene.
This is another episode we didn't get a B plot. So we were kind of like slugging through this whole deception, which every time we got new information, it was just laid out. And people immediately figured out, like, there was brief mystery, but the mystery was immediately solved, right?
It was tell, not show.
Yeah, like even with the no industry conversation, it's like we have no industry. And then so Picard and Crusher so they provide you with everything. Oh, they provide us with the necessities of life, and we provide them with the necessity of living. It's like, well, that's exactly the quandary we are summarizing. You just said it.
So, and I think it was to give a sense of empathy towards the Breckons, because you're supposed to take that information and go, oh, well, if they learn this, they lose their only industry, and now it's gonna be reversed. So it's this fear of the people that are being taken advantage of or exploited. They're afraid of them rising up and not just wanting equality, but revenge. And
wow.
It sounds familiar.
Sure does. Sure does. So the Breckons are basically like white supremacy in a nutshell.
Yeah. The thing is, as sad as this is, it's not an isolated case in humanity either. Most of the time it is white people of some form or another. But, it's to show an examination of cultures and civilizations, and an extrapolation, as we saw in our bonus episode in the Star Trek Next Generation Bible. It's an extrapolation of these like thought experiments and real science. What would happen? What would these societies look like? And then we catch this glimpse, this like slice of life of these individuals caught within a larger deception.
Speaking of a larger deception, another analogy for Breckons to me is professions that do not add tangible value to the world. I went on a rant on my stream yesterday about this, about UBI. It's all related because the people who are most monetarily rewarded in our society are like hedge fund managers or people that deal with moving money from place to place and not actually creating tangible value for anyone. Like people who are calling essential workers now, those people actually, like the part of UBI is like those people are not paid what they're do for the value that they tangibly create. And if we really, gave contribution value, then those people would be rewarded more, like the Onarans.
Yes. Exactly. And I think that is from a core value, at least this is my perspective, that was shared, especially in like higher powered jobs of, well, you have to work smarter, not harder. And so you're valued for, minimizing the physical labor that you have to do because you've delegated it out to someone else, minimizing how much that labor is worth.
But it quickly became crueler, not cooler.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh.
They did so much telling of us of like everything. They laid it out verbally, and then I thought they had a real opportunity to show something, and they tried it. And it was when the Onarans actually got their dosage, and they took it, and they started to kind of like act like addicts who have just had another hit of something, and they kind of like start to relax, and they have like euphoria. Yeah, and the camera slowly zooms in on Crusher, and
it's so long.
It's so long. She does so much acting of like, I've realized it now. And if you watch the scene again, you can watch poor Gates McFadden as she glances at the camera to see if they're done. And she looks twice. She's like, "Are we done? Are we done with the shot?" And she can't. I felt so bad for her.
I wrote the Gates McFadden stare.
Yeah. But you can see the switch from actor to character back.
That's hilarious.
She also says, a lot of obvious. I think she makes a great argument to the captain. Like, do you think that drug addiction, exploitation merit intervention? And he's just flat out, nothing merits intervention because that's the way the Prime Directive is. We can't impose our values on other societies.
Now, wait, I want to explain how Picard already had violated the Prime Directive by that point. But first, we skipped over something very important where they did show not tell, which is the natural electrical charge.
Oh, right.
You know about these? I call them zappy hands.
I call them shocking grasp.
I call shenanigans.
Sounds like a magic card.
Yeah.
Shocking grasp.
And a D&D spell.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Okay, so they're in the cargo hold because they're like, we need to see our cargo that was more important than our humans. By the way, 2 people died on your ship. Do you care? We didn't transport them over, but you got the goods, right? Yeah. That's a real addict right there. So Riker shows them. We see Yar's in the cargo bay with Riker and with these 4 people transported over, 2 Breckons, 2 Onarans. And then they look at the goods and they're like bickering throughout the show. There's just this back and forth of like, we bought it, you didn't pay for it, we bought it, we didn't pay for it. and
then finally I think Beverly is like, enough, and that's like the audience, we're like, thank you, enough.
But in the scene in the cargo bay, they just start shocking each other with their electric hands. And then Riker doesn't say anything, he's just watching for a while.
What would you do?
And then he says security and calls it in on his comms when head of security is Lieutenant Yar, who's in the room. Why didn't she call for backup? And then she just like shoots him with a phaser and is like, play nice.
Yeah, well, I could
ridiculous scene.
That chain of command in that Yar would be expected to handle this problem right now while Commander would call for backup. And she did handle it in a way and then was sassy about it.
Yeah, she got the sass line at least. It felt like 2 wizards who could only use the shocking grasp cantrip or something. And they're too weak to really do anything to each other.
Now, why, once they realized that these really irrational, arguing people that they transported on board their ship had this power, which she said, and we can't take it away from them either.
Actually, hold on. There might be something to this improv group theory, because this feels very much like, I have lightning hands. And you're like, you do
I have lightning hands too!
Guess we gotta put some graphics in the budget for that later.
and Yar's like trying to like save the scene by like trying to button it up with like, play nice. Let's get back to the space adventure we're supposed to be having.
But why didn't they put them in a holding cell and put them under have security on them for the rest of the time after they started attacking each other? Because guess what?
Any more extras? They spent all their budget on Morph's makeup again.
Yeah.
Well, I think they also regarded these guys as like not a threat because they like a lot of the pre-warp technology people, they tend to just like kind of coddle a little bit. So as long as they have a security team around, I think they felt safe, right? Even though there wasn't security escorting them.
Yeah, we'll see that sort of Starfleet arrogance time and time again of like, you feel so safe in this little contained bubble with all your problems solved that you're like, sure, come aboard. What could go wrong?
Yeah, until a shocking hand threatens to shock you right to death.
Yeah.
So Crusher makes her case. She says, I completely 100% disagree, which, I mean, we can see that. So again, we didn't need her to say that. I want her to be able to like just like take some action or something.
Mm-hmm.
But we get to the point to where it's a pretty clear line, and actually we don't know what Picard's gonna do.
Yeah.
So then we get to the say no to drugs scene. So let me explain to you what I've read, a little bit of the backstory here. Maurice Hurley, who was a co-executive producer, also worked on Miami Vice, and he intended to have an original copy of the script was going to have the Enterprise was coming across a drug deal already in progress. And so I don't know how it got changed to where it did, but he took credit for this. And he said, it's kind of my fault because there was objections for the cast about the Just Say No speech. He said, I take the blame for that. I jammed it in over everyone's objections. They were screaming on set. The actors were screaming. They were puking. They were yelling, we can't do this. I said, no, there are kids out there. If we're going to take the message, if we're going to make the message, let's make the message. If it offends the adults or bothers some kids, then by God, we're going to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, he really forced it in. And I think he, I don't know if he regrets it, but it sounds like he does.
Yeah.
Drugs can make you feel good, make you feel on top of the world, happy, sure of yourself, in control. Should just stop there. I mean,
yeah.
Well, it was such a weird nuance
because
I mean, there's valid points in that speech in that their drug addiction is a very bad thing, and there are very harmful drugs that you can spiral out of control with, right? But there was a weird line of like altering your brain state if it's not real can ruin your life, and that's not quite shown so much. It's just like some people have withdrawals.
Right. Yeah, it was a very like surface level understanding of like. It was the basic, like, this is the least we can do. You know, we might as well put this in. Kids are going to see it, so the message is good. But there wasn't thought behind what message you're sending and how it's being sent.
Yeah, the message should be know where your drugs are coming from, have a babysitter, know your dosage, be careful, people.
If the society you're getting it from has a full industry in other areas as well.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Wesley, like, I think is going to experiment at some point, right? I mean, he's an engineering/science potential officer, right? Like he's going to see into the nebulas, right?
His whole guiding principle is like, I need to see it or experience it for myself. So that's actually a Yar thing too, that we see a bit of wanting to be upfront and a part of it, and why we see this sort of like mentorship, because I think they're trying to cram in that backstory for Yar again, that we keep hearing the same little bit of it over and over of like, okay, she grew up on the streets and had a rough life, and doesn't go any further than that.
Yeah, but they were really rough. Okay.
Yeah.
So Becca, let's get to your point now. So
okay,
we're at the point
hold on. I want to explain a little more about Yar's backstory. So it was tough,
right?
It was rough.
Yeah,
she had to suffer, and it was hard. Okay, we can move on.
But it's interesting, just one little point off of that is that with that bit of information, we're supposed to create the rest of it on our own. And it's a really interesting thought experiment in that sense of like, what does that look like to you?
Are you quoting it, Becca? Is that what she said?
Oh, no, that's just my interpretation. I'm doing an improv scene of Yar.
Yeah. It's interesting the language they use for some of this, because even in the very beginning of this, there was the solar flare, right?
Yeah.
Weren't they saying something about how it's awesome, or like, and the pattern is irregular? Like they kept using very basic descriptions for things as opposed to like either showing it or elaborating.
Well, they didn't know what it would look like yet.
Yeah, that's true.
They were looking at it on the viewer.
Wow. But the actors.
Oh.
It's either really bright and shiny or really nebulous and flowy.
That's something right there on that screen.
Yeah.
So Picard,
wow. Ooh, big thing.
So Picard has the dilemma, right? He sees the exploitation of this society, but he has this directive of not interfering, no matter the consequences, because he's not allowed to put his own values on it.
Well, then I guess he could never give them a coil to power their ship, because that would be interfering.
Right. Yeah. So, Becca, you didn't feel that he solved their problem with what his answer was, because there was a little bit more to it than that from what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
You want to?
So
Do you want me
yeah.
to remind you?
Oh,
So
yeah. Go for it.
these coils that were gonna, repair their freighters, because apparently not just this one ship that got sucked into the solar flare planet situation, but all of their freighters, they've forgotten how to do any of the industry they once knew because they're so addicted to drugs. And so all of their freighters are going to need this coil replaced, which at one point I thought, like, maybe they could find the drug in the coil, so they took it apart to do the drug, because that's a real tweaker thing to do, Anyway, so they can't transport back and forth between the other planet if they can't get these coils. So Picard was just going to give it to them, but that is interfering in another society.
Right.
So here's the line you draw.
Okay, but
Okay,
he's giving them the medicine this one time, right? Because that's his level. He's saying, I'm not interfering. See, I'm playing by the rules. You want to give them this medication because the Breckons were afraid of them overcoming the withdrawal and realizing they didn't need the medicine by going through the worst of it, right? So they wanted them to have the medicine. So Picard granted that, allowed that to happen, but then kept the coils because the Breckons need those freighters to come and bring every other supply to their planet.
And for those two Breckons to get home.
Exactly. So eventually, either they're going to solve the problem by fixing the freighters or teaching the Odanians, or whatever their name is, how to fix them, Onarans, how to fix them themselves. Or they're going to run out of the drug because they can't get it to the planet anyway, and they're going to go through the withdrawal, but on a planet-wide level. Yeah. So in a way, Picard is solving the problem in the future.
It's just he normally comes up with something really clever, and I thought this was a little like, okay, well, you don't know if they're going to figure it out, and then they're still totally effed.
I thought this was very clever.
But my problem is that I think he violated the Prime Directive in ever agreeing to give them coils.
Well, again, it's a little washy line. It's a little bit of a wishy-washy line when Star Trek addresses it, because, again, as you made a good point earlier in this episode, is that, like, how can we experience other civilizations if we're not allowed to talk to them, right? Mm-hmm. So they help people in distress, but then they're like, we're going to try and not interfere as little as possible. By doing what Picard did, he kind of evened out his intervention. He's like, okay, we stepped into this, but now we're stepping out and letting the consequences of what they've developed happen to them, because it's the Breckians' own fault that the Onarans can't have their ships maintained because their society is so driven by their addiction to the drug that they can't maintain their own industry to help with trade, right? Mm-hmm. So Picard, I think I wouldn't say explicitly, but he like looks to them and says, look, you're going to have to solve this problem with them because we're not going to give you the coils and solve your problem for you. And the Breckians they have that look in their eye of like, okay, we have to change our ways in some way.
Or we're going to figure this out. Screw you, dude. We're still going to keep our system going. Yeah. Here's my answer. If I were Picard or Crusher, I just start leaking little memos to the whole crew of the USS Enterprise that's like, no, we're not interfering. We've chosen not to interfere in these two civilizations' conflict, and it's very clear that one has been drugging the other and they're not actually sick. And just put that out in a press release, like a whole, just a ship-wide memo, if you will. And if they happen to see it because they're walking by a screen and it's the computer's making an announcement, well, that's not interfering.
But so one of the things that I like
good,
this,
right? It's
and
good.
I want to go off of this thought experiment because that's what the whole thing is. So let's say that happens, and the Onarans find out that yes, we're being drugged, but the addict's reaction is probably not going to be, oh, we're being drugged. Go ahead and stop it then. I don't want it. We're not going to die. They're all going to go through the withdrawal, and then it's going to become another form of dependency. In my thought experiment, that's how I would see that happen. So I think the only way is like the rude awakening. That's what they're prescribing because that's what the treatment for drug addiction was at the time. Mm-hmm. They have to go through withdrawal. They have to experience it and clear it out of their system, and then they will never touch it again. Like that's obviously not how it's going to work, but
Crusher offered to create a withdrawal drug that will, fulfill what they need without giving them an addiction.
Ease their symptoms, actually.
Yeah. So maybe I think that it doesn't violate the Prime Directive to just give them information, to just say, here's what's very clear to us from an observer's point of view. You take the information and you do what you will.
But
Not our
that is
problem.
interference, though, Becca. That's giving
But
them
it's as
knowledge.
much interference, it's the level as giving them a coil for their ship.
100%. 100%. But that's the thing, is like, the directive is clear and they do disobey it. And like as you mentioned, they disobeyed it in previous episodes. They're going to disobey it again. So it's used as a wavering rationale. But I think they still keep it consistent in terms of their understanding of it. Their obedience to it, I think, does change. I think you're right.
And I think that you can argue there's a difference between coming across a ship that needs a part that they would already have, that you're just replacing, versus like giving some technology to a ship that didn't have that. Like if they didn't have those coils and they're like, this will make your ships better, that would be directly interfering, I think. But they already had these coils. They're just replacing them and doing that maintenance. When you're in a ship in distress, I think that would be a clear line to follow.
Well, I'm glad that I've made you guys stick really hard to the opposite point of view just to debate me on this.
No, I love having these talks. That's what it's all about, because, I think the point is there's not an easy answer.
I would have disobeyed the Prime Directive if I was on board the ship. I was 100% agree with Crusher. I really do.
Too.
I'm with you, Becca. But I understand what Picard's trying to do as his solution. But I'm on Crusher's side and your side. I think I would develop a medicine to make it easier on them and say, fuck the Prime Directive. It's better for their well-being as a species.
Yeah, or maybe not even tell them what the Breckons did and just say, here's an alternate drug that you could make yourself. Here's the recipe.
Call us if you need more.
Not to further this, but to go on the other side of that, by instantly doing that, giving either these withdrawal drugs or this information or whatever, you're instantly condemning this other race who now no longer has any industry and
might start a war.
Well, most definitely.
And who in their society is being exploited? Because Xander made a good point of like, is it the powerful people in the Brecken society that are using this as an exploitation method, or is it everyone and they're all in on it, which seems unlikely, right? So there's probably people being exploited on their planet as well. Probably the workers that are mining it, which they made a huge deal about how exhausted it was, right? Yeah.
Well, you know what?
And then 20 years from now, we've got the Brecken Raiders who are taking revenge on the Federation who gave them this,
It's a great storyline option, though.
Yeah,
True. Well, the Prime Directive is a philosophy.
And I think
well-intentioned.
I think that's a great line. That's a great way to put it. And, you can only stick to your morals, to your guiding principles as much as you can.
Yeah.
I'm sure this has been a fodder for a different episode somewhere, but in that speech, he said that no matter how well-intentioned, the results of intervention have been disastrous. So I'm curious, what was the catalyst to creating the Prime Directive?
Ooh, the one thing.
Well, how many wars did they start before they made this Prime Directive?
There's got to be a Trekkie out there that actually knows the lore on this, but I think that there was a major conflict with it's the Vulcans and the humans, and I think it involved the Romulans, and it's like this nebulous, like there was a war, and something happened. I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
creation and development.
That sounds like as clear as DR's backstory. That's fine.
That's true. It was hard. There were orphans.
Oh, goodness. Well, do you guys want to head to the opera line system?
I love that Picard was just like, let's get the fuck out of here at the end of this episode. It's like, just go anywhere.
Anywhere.
And Geordi says the opera line system, and someone asked him why, and he says, curiosity. I've never been there before. And there's a nice silent pause.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then we get
Wait, hold on. No. Wait, can we do a different one instead? I got a better one, which is the one that Xander texted. Because you know what? I'm really done with this episode. I'm done with these drugs. I'm done with these planets. And I'm just going to say,
bye, Felicium. Felicium.
Yeah. Jake,
I was looking frantically at my text messages trying to figure out what you were referencing. I was like, okay, this is Politico.com. That's not what I need. Okay, Felicium.
Hey, that's all the people want, is to watch you scramble helplessly. Well, let's sign off to the YouTube vids. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye, Felicium.